this event came out of the fact that, particularly when we first moved in, every dinner I went to, people wanted to know this story. And I would fall for it, and I would start to tell the story because I liked the story. And then I'd realize I wasn't eating my dinner, and I wasn't actually getting to know the people I was having dinner with. So at one point I said, I'm not telling this story again until there are enough people so that we can record it and have it, there for reference. So this is the result of wanting to actually do as full a job as possible of just the story of how it came to be. It's not going to include everything, but it'll give you a sense of maybe the journey and the impetus. So that's the purpose of the night. We're going to do our best to go through it for about 40 minutes or so and give plenty of time for questions at the end. So if you could hold your questions until the end, and we'll get a rhythm going, and we'll be talking with each other and see how it goes. So the panel these are the people who were part of why it became, very big parts. So I'm Susan O'Connell. I'm a resident, and you'll find out my part of the story in a minute. Ed Sattizahn was the board chair of Zen Center. Previously, he had lived at Zen Center and been the president. He had practiced with Suzuki Roshi. He went out and had a life, a very lovely, successful life in educational software. Tech. He did tech. He's a mathematician and a genius and a wonderful human being. And eventually, he came back into Zen Center and became abiding abbot and then the central abbot of Zen Center. And we worked very closely together throughout the whole process. Walter Kieser is a board member of the Ensō Village board. He is a dear friend and he'll tell you the story of how he got involved. He is an urban economist. And what does that mean, Walter?
My mother never understood.
Yeah.
Worked in the public policy and development and conservation and those sorts of things as a consultant for many years.
Yeah, he worked with a lot of municipalities, including having worked with Healdsburg. I think maybe most of you know Schroeder, and she, during this story, had multiple roles, and it ended up with her becoming the abiding abbess of Green Gulch, and now she's here along with us as one of the Zen elders. So she'll be talking about, from her point of view, how things went and how they didn't go, and various other things. and Mark Schieble at the end is on the board of the Zen Center now. He is an attorney. He was retired fully now? Yes, okay. Recently retired from Foley, Lardner. And what I came to find out partway into the process is not only was he, providing huge amounts of pro bono work, and, when we were just stumbling along at the beginning, but his expertise was in tax-exempt bond offerings, right? And that came as a surprise to me, Yeah. And there you were, yeah. So he's here to talk about aspects that he was involved with too. So
could I
yeah.
make a brief introductory comment?
Yes.
Okay, so
put it up to your mouth. Up to your mouth. Yep.
Okay, recently retired lawyer, and I have been tangentially involved in the development of this community since I think the beginning. But in terms of the importance of contributors, I think it's in that order, that's starting with Susan and Ed and Walter and working down here. As a lawyer, I basically worked on deals, and not uncommon in working on deals, you get to a point where things are just not working out. And you say, okay, we tried, it's not going anywhere. When we get into the presentation here, you'll see there were some roadblocks along the way. And the first one that came up, I thought, well, okay, we tried, that's it. But I think Susan and Ed sort of, persevered in that. And there was another significant sort of existential roadblock that be discussed. And once again, I thought, well, we tried, that's the end of the deal. But Susan and Ed sort of persevered through it. So I just want to make a point here that the degree of diligence and effort that they brought to the table, I think deserves a lot of special recognition. Because
Thanks, Mark. Walter.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you for that introduction to the introduction. I wanted to begin by simply having everyone just consider where you are right now. And I am involved in lots and lots of projects, and just as Mark has said, some of them come to fruition, some of them don't. A lot of effort, a lot of goodwill. This one came to fruition, and we're all here together today. And in some ways, I blink and as if it were a miracle. And in some ways, and after you hear the story, you'll begin to think that it was a miracle. But I think it's very important. There are obviously still issues and things and evolution going on in the community, but it's really amazing to me as somebody involved in creating a lot of things that this particular one came together. So we're going to tell a story tonight in 7 different parts. It starts at the very beginning and brings us up to when we occupied, or the Ensō Village was occupied. And along the way, I want to, the themes that will be here will be the initial vision. And Susan is the visionary, plus, and plus. There was also insight. There was an understanding about the needs of Zen Center to take care of its retiring clergy, and also to share Zen in one manner or another with the broader community where there was interest. There was collaboration. We knew from the beginning that this wasn't going to happen by ourselves, by just Zen Center. We needed partners. And there were difficulties, as Mark has alluded to along the way, major ones, minor ones, and all of them were overcome ultimately. But that part of that is, in that moment of failure and difficulty, resilience. And over again, the resilience of the organization, of Susan, was what is part of the magic, part of the secret sauce. And of course, last but not least, persistence, just keeping going, keeping the paddles in the water and moving forward. So that's a story. I'm very, very pleased and amazed that this all came to pass, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to continue to participate. So with that, I would like Susan, the visionary, to kick off by going back to the beginnings.
Yeah, we'll go back to the beginnings. Thank you, Walter. Ed's going to take part of this slide. So it's called The Beginnings, and he's going to tell you what that means.
Thank you very much, Susan. I'm so pleased to be here and to see all of you. I had been at Zen Center, as Susan said, for 10 years when I was young, and then I went into business for 20 years, and I came back and they asked me to get back involved in Zen Center, and one of the first things I learned was that through their compassionate heart, the organization had promised all of its elder people that had lived for 20 years on staff at Zen Center that they could retire at Zen Center. And I thought, how wonderful. These are my friends. Of course, they have not made any money all this time. They can retire. And I then asked, I was on the board, I said, and how is that going to be done? Is there any money on the balance sheet? No. I called it a large unfunded liability. And the second question I had was, and where will they be living? Because they were all promised a room, and they, small monk's room, but still food. And so at that time, it was fortunate I ran into Susan, and Susan said, I have an idea. And without saying anything about her idea and how much it captured me, I'll let Susan say something about that idea.
Right. So I can give you a number of what the problem was, what the opportunity was. There were 35 people who were eligible for the retirement plan. And my first, question was, has anyone, where are the beds? Where do we have 35 rooms? Because if we actually fulfilled that, we would have filled up one of our 3 places. So we have a place in the city, several buildings, we have Green Gulch Farm and Tassajara. To take any of them and just fill it with 35 elders retiring, there'd be no place for the next generation to come up and come through and refresh the training and the practice. And none of our buildings were suitable for senior living. So I couldn't imagine no one had thought of that. But when the commitment was made in 1985, the people who made the commitment were in their 40s. And of course, you're never going to get old, right? So why would they think about it? But here it was now. For some reason, I was on the board, and I brought this up, and we formed a small committee. Emily was part of it, and Jeremy, and we started to think about it. And then, pop, one day, I said, how about if we put 20 of our elders in a larger community, so they would be, I kept using the word ensconced, in a larger community, and that community would be Zen-inspired. It would have the presence of some senior teachers, and it would have some of our practices, and ultimately our kind of Zen way of turning towards things. Turning towards working with wisdom and compassion, using a lot of the stuff that we had learned living together for 60 years. So that was it. That was the idea. And it just seemed possible. Why wouldn't that be of interest in the world? So so we formed a committee. Let me move the slide. And Linda Ruth doesn't like it when I say this, but for a while we were calling it Gray Gulch. And and here's the elements that I just described. Ensconce 15 to 20 Zen elders in a larger community, invite like-minded elders to share our, the kind of way of meeting life, principles, ethics, aesthetics of Zen, and then use the profits to subsidize the cost of the units. So it's a nice little circle that kind of touches itself. Now, for some reason, then I put a larger committee together. There were 13 people because we needed more buy-in because this is crazy for us to do this, right? And we had wonderful people who helped write the vision statement, get it to the board, and the board was interested in pursuing it further. So then we tried to start to find out what others really thought. So we did a little survey within Zen Center itself. And I think we got, I want to say 425 surveys back. We just used the Zen Center membership. And in those surveys, 80% of the people said they'd be interested in something like this. The wider community. Would the wider community be interested in this setup? And 80% said, yeah. And I thought, oh, okay, Zen-inspired senior living. It seems to be affecting people in a positive way. Just those words. It was just words. So we did a survey, but as Walter said, we knew we needed a partner. There was no way Zen Center was going to do this because we don't know how to do it. We know how to live together, and we know how to maybe share our practice, but we don't know how to build a senior community. So we started looking for a partner, and a wonderful man, a doctor, came to me, and he had heard about Kendall, East Coast. He knew someone who was living in a Kendall on the East Coast. So I looked at it a little bit, and I thought, ooh, they look like kind of the A-team, on the East. It's not huge, but it's quality. And so I called the CEO, and his name is John Diffie, and he said, well, come on and talk to us. So I flew back to Philadelphia, and he set up the conference room with the heads of all of the departments at Kendall and gave me like 3 hours of sitting in that room with them and spinning this idea. And there was a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of, questions, but like feeling of support and goodness of this possibility. And of course I went thinking, well, they should just do this because it's so wonderful, right? And so at the end of the meeting, I also thought, well, maybe they'll also give us some money. They'll give us some money and they'll do this. And he looked at me and he said, wonderful idea, but go away, figure it out, and come back, right? And at the time, we did not have a board with a lot of retired people on it. We had a working board with people who had jobs. So there wasn't someone I could kind of grab and say, let's spend the next year, researching this and figuring it out. So that process wasn't an easy one, but we started. And then there was internal resistance. And one of the reasons I asked Fu to be on this panel is not just that, but it's that the resistance is an important part of the story. Resistance is always an important part of the story. That's where creativity happens. And so thought that maybe, Fu could talk a little bit about the very valid reasons why there was resistance within Zen Center.
So that's why I wore my black shirt. I'm here to represent the resistance to this project. And I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I've told Susan that many times how sorry I am. But basically, my resistance wasn't to this. It was to the fact that Zen Center has always been hard to get money. We've always had to work very hard to make our money, to pay for our bills and so on. We have 3 places. They're all in disrepair. So we had done this thing with the Tassar Bakery, which some of you may know about, where we tried to expand the bakery, and after a very short period of time, we started bleeding green. Money was just pouring out of Zen Center, and we were in real danger. And so we had been promised that we were going to be making bread rolls for the Fairmont Hotel, and we were going to be, just very wealthy, no time at all. And instead, we were just starting to sink. So I had a real fear about ideas that seemed much greater than our ability to work on the ground and take care of our properties and so on. So this just seemed like such a fantasy that was just so far out of anything I could imagine. So Susan held a workshop to help those of us in the residence. She's called it Money. And so we met in the Wheelwright Center, and she talked to us about money. She said, you people don't know anything about money. And we all said, that's right, we don't. But she did, in a good way, and so did these fine people as well. So we learned a lot about money, and at some point, I felt like the resistance was not helpful. I mean, I tried my best as a board member to stop it. I did whatever I could to say, let's not do this. We can take care of each other. We always have. But the logic and the reasoning was really there that we don't have what we need in order to take care of ourselves. So the story you're hearing is one of great success, and for me, great gratitude that this did happen, and I didn't succeed in stopping Ensō Village.
Thank you, Fu. Yes, and there were kind of attempts to think about what people said. Well, we have to have an alternative. I said, as long as you call it Plan B, because this is Plan A. And so we brought in Methuen, some of the architects who worked on this, and looked at the city center. So could we renovate? Could we combine lots? Could we do any of that? And I remember this was not very kind of me, but I would sit back and say, great, what's your plan? And it turns out that the things people were trying weren't feasible for some reason. The city wouldn't allow putting the lots together, and they were going to cost money. And fundraising is not one of Zen Center's strengths, right? Usually, yeah.
One of the best decisions I made when I was the chairman of the board was to put Susan in charge of our development department. And Fu's fears were not unfounded, because in addition to this unfunded liability, when I came back, I realized all of our buildings had not been taken care of. We had some numbers run on projections of expenses going up because of healthcare costs of all the people that we were providing healthcare to, and our revenue was flatline. We called it the scary curve. Zen Center looked like it was unsustainable. So not only did we have this magnificent project that Susan dreamed up, and I just want to make one comment about that. Zen Center has always had a feeling for what the culture needed. We started Green's Restaurant, which most of you are aware of. Huge success, because we sort of thought, well, we eat vegetarian food, let's have good vegetarian food, And we started a bakery because we like eating good bread, and maybe everybody else should. And so this sort of sense of having a sense of the times, I felt when Susan brought this is another one of those. This is one of those moments where you're sensing where retirement is going, and we might have the right answer.
Yeah, thanks. So we started looking for a partner. When Kendall said, go away and figure it out and come back, there were a few local possibilities in the Bay Area, and it's hard to find the right partner because they have to have the kind of money that can help you start things, the hardest money to find. And so NCPHS, which is Northern California Presbyterian Homes and Services, which is now called Sequoia Living. I met someone at a conference. Someone adopted me, this wonderful woman who was a, Gerontological Services, Inc., who did surveys, on senior living, marketing surveys. She introduced me to this woman, Barbara Hood, who was the only female head of a senior living community at the time. And so I went in, and they had just done a survey that they had a rabbi do about how important spirituality was to aging. And I walked in the door. So great timing. And then the staff just got very excited about this. And we started to meet and work, and how would we do this? And we had no money, we had no site, we had nothing except the concept. So for a long, long time, we just had a concept. So I think you'd be interested in this statement, because it's not that far from where we ended up. We started with what we're going to do together, the two organizations, living together, creating community, caring for each other, mindful of our aging and the preciousness of this impermanent life in a calm, quiet, simple but beautiful environment in which the practices of wisdom and compassion are expressed in people's open hearts, which I see every day here, using aging and illness and death as guidelines on the spiritual path, and encouraging meditation as a practice of self-discovery, heart-opening, and a tool for the development of mindfulness. This was in 2010. So wonderful people at this place. So we did need a little bit of money. So Ed and I and others decided to do something else that was impossible, which is raise $16.9 million in a capital campaign. The most we had ever raised before, when Fu and I were in the development office, was $750,000 at one go. And we were going for 17 million. And so, yeah, that's a whole other story. That's why I have a dog. No, literally, I had to barter for my previous dog. I said, I'll do this, but I need a dog. So we did this capital campaign. There was a small portion of it, which was kind of a fund that you could spend on something. It was an endowment. And we raised about $100,000 as part of that whole bigger campaign. And that allowed us to hire Greenbrier. And that's a name you probably should know because we work with them here. They're the ones that are working in the marketing office, and they do their professional developers. Why don't you tell about hiring Greenbrier, Ed?
Okay. We had a meeting with these folks, which happened in the conference room at San Francisco Zen Center, and they laid out, because NCPH had backed away from working with us, and we were at one of those moments where how are we going to move this program
No,
forward?
they hadn't left yet.
No, they hadn't.
They hadn't
hadn't?
left it. No.
Well,
no,
all right.
We were just trying to find out.
Anyway,
Yeah.
the meeting I remember was Greenbrier laid out in exquisite detail financially how we could build a Zen retirement community with maybe $3 million in beginning assets. And we had been fortunate in that the person who had been a long-term donor to Zen Center for over 40 years and had kind of inspired us to do this $17 million capital campaign had stepped forward and said, I like your idea, and I would be willing to give you $3 million to pursue it. There are certain restrictions on that. You first have to find a partner, and you have to find some land. But once you have that, you could move forward. And not only that, he said, and I would help with a little retirement endowment of maybe $6.5 million that would help you pay the early fees for these retirees there. So that was such a tremendous support for this little tiny effort that we were putting a lot of energy into. And then Greenbrier, in a meeting, said you could do it with that. And so we thought, well, let's give it a go.
Yep. And then we did another marketing survey. We wanted to go out into the wider world, proof of concept. So they said we could do it with $3 million and other things, and we needed to know if the world was going to respond. So we did a marketing survey. We got a 23% rate of return on a mailed marketing survey. I don't know any marketers out there. That was incredible. No one had they had so much information, it took them 2 months longer to analyze the material. And what came from that was, like, we asked, well, where would you like it to be? And so 50% of them wanted it in the city, and 50% wanted it to be rural, or, not like country, but country-ish. No one wanted it to be suburban. That was really clear. And so we had all of this information, and 70% said they were interested in moving in. This is just words. Zen-inspired senior living. That's it. So, so then we were, let's see, we also got more money from the major donor to be able to put into a retirement endowment to be able to help support the costs of the ongoing support the ongoing costs of the elders being cared for. And then the team got bigger, and go Walter.
Okay. So I became involved.
Mic on.
Sorry. Gotcha. Okay. I became involved in the project one afternoon driving home across the Bay Bridge. And it was Michael Krasny's program was on the radio. And Susan was there with
Norman Fisher.
Norman Fisher. And they were being interviewed. And Susan was talking about Zen Center and its history as a part of the 50th anniversary. And she said, and we're in the future, we're working on this. And she spouted off. And my ears perked up. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I'm part of Zen Center and have been for a long, long time. And this is kind of sort of what I do for a living. So, but the key thing there and the lesson is that I knew that if I got back to my office and didn't make a call right then, nothing would ever happen. Very important. And I did. And I called Susan up and I said, say, I'm happy. You might want to talk to me about this.
Yeah.
And in my firm's business, we had done a lot of feasibility and financing work on assisted living projects, CCRCs. We knew Greenbrier from that. So I brought all of that experience, and probably most importantly, having a practice here in the Bay Area and working, I had a pretty good idea about sites in the Bay Area. And so my main goal was to help with that process of locating sites.
Yeah.
So that's it.
And in addition to Walter and all of his expertise, the fact that he has a connection to Zen Center and had met Suzuki Roshi and Berkeley Zen Center. He was on the chair of the board of Berkeley Zen Center when all this happened. There was another person who actually I grabbed him in the lobby of Zen Center one day. He had been the deputy mayor of San Francisco and was in charge of urban planning. So here were two teachers for me. Like, teach me how to understand the basics of how you do this. I didn't know how to do this. There is a book, which I did read the book, but so anyway, having Walter and David, and like pro bono, just their time and expertise and devotion, and their affinity with what we were doing. It's been like this the whole way. So. So basically, then we knew we needed a site. And Walter and I thought that it would be fun to just give you a little taste. We looked at probably 20 sites from Monterey up to here. This was the northernmost site we looked at. And it's very, sites are very rare. You can't just take a beautiful farm, and change it into, something that we could build on. So do you want to say anything about any of these sites?
Well, I would just say that in each case, we knew the criteria, that it had to have urban services, it had to have the opportunity to gain an entitlement. We didn't want to be involved in some plan to change land use substantially. We knew that it had to be in a place that would be attractive based on the survey information that we had. But what I really remember was driving around week after week to these sites, and with Susan and Linda Ruth and others, David, looking at these sites in the back countries of Monterey County, and also encountering a lot of interesting people. And we had evaluation. We had an evaluation framework that allowed us to say, well, this isn't going to work for one reason or another. So this was a substantial effort.
Yeah.
Literally hundreds of hours went into looking at these sites, considering them, interviewing the owners, interviewing potential development partners, all the rest of it. And it was a long and tedious process. I will just say that. But and it's interesting that this site was considered at early on with the Presbyterians, and for various reasons it was rejected before later on we came back to it.
Right. So that's part of the. Also, we brought the Zen elders on buses and showed various people's sites too. So we're working with the Presbyterians. We're looking at sites together. We're trying to develop things together. We come up here to this site in Healdsburg, and it was the whole site we were looking at. And it had a fatal flaw, according to the Presbyterians, which was it didn't have a second emergency access point. And they weren't actually developers. If they'd been developers, they would have taken the risk and figured it out, which is what Mr. Comstock did. He found one of his people, he worked with him, got the trained people to let that other access happen over near the hotel, which allowed this to be fully developable. But the Presbyterians hadn't developed in over 10 years. So this was something that was a weak spot in the partnership. And, the story of how it fell apart. So we had a wonderful Abbot, Steve Stuckey. And he and I worked together very closely with Ed and Linda Ruth. And he found out in September that he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I was the president of Zen Center, and he and I were very close. So he basically got sicker and sicker, and he died in December. We had been working with the Presbyterians, and they knew him, and et cetera. And at his cremation, the president of the Presbyterians showed up for his cremation ceremony, which was interesting. And she looked at me and she said, "Can I call you Monday?" And I just looked in her face, and I saw it. I saw something was wrong. And so she called on Monday, and she said, "This is the hardest call I've ever had to make. We have a disagreement in our board about how we're supposed to be spending our capital. There's another site available. We're going to do the other site, and we can't work with you." And yeah, it was crushing. So at that same moment at Zen Center, I was saying this to Fu the other day, Steve Stuckey died, which meant that the abbots all had to rotate and move into new positions. So Ed became central abbot, which Steve had been. Fu became abbess of Green Gulch. Linda Ruth.
Linda Ruth became central abbot. I became city center.
Exactly, something like that. But that's what it was like. And I'm in the middle, and I'm the president. I'm the only one who isn't moving. And I got vertigo for 2 weeks. So, and we got this phone call. And so it was really hard. And I remember reporting it to the board, and it was one of the moments where I actually cried for and I thought, I cried for about 30 seconds. But, then the crying was over, right? It's very interesting because I could have been crushing, but for some reason, my body wouldn't stop. I don't know why. So there we were, we had nothing. We had no land, we had money, but we couldn't spend it until we had a partner. We had the world telling us, this is a really good idea. That's what we had. And we had no alternatives. We started looking again for alternative models. And you want to, I think at Green Gulch, there was this idea of putting people in 4 units for 6 people and trying to do something. But again, it wasn't feasible in terms of permit, and it also would have cost money we didn't have. So I went to the donor, and I said, I know we can't spend the $3 million. Well, we can't spend the $3 million because we don't have a partner, but we need to spend money to get a partner. So we're in a bind here. And the representative said, "Oh, well, I'll give you another $250,000. So that helped. And then, of course, the Zen Center board was resistant again because we had nothing. We had nothing, but we had a little bit of money. And so continuing to look at alternative plans, what are we going to do here? What are we going to do there? So with Walter and David's brilliance, we started to try to find a new model that we wouldn't need such a big company to make happen. The model is less important than the fact that we were bold enough to put a request for a new partner out there in the world. And we got 3 responses. And one of those responses was Bridge Housing, which is a affordable housing partner. So, I am concerned that I want to leave time for questions, and I don't want to go too late. So I won't go into the details of Bridge. Is that okay, Walter?
Yes.
Yeah. They were wonderful people. But at that moment, in order to keep making deals with people, we put together this thing that you may have heard us mention from time to time, ZISL, Zen-inspired senior living. And do you want to say a little bit about what that is?
Be happy to. So things started moving at a faster pace with Bridge Housing on board, and site selection was moving along. And up to this point, all decisions were being made by the San Francisco Zen Center board, which, if any of you have been involved in that situation, boards don't work quickly. So we needed something more. We needed a team who could react to things and make decisions quicker. So the decision was made to set up ZISL as a California limited liability company that's wholly owned by San Francisco Zen Center. So again, for the purpose of facilitating decision-making quickly. Also the sense that, we started to get a sense of the magnitude of the capital investment here, well upwards of $200 million. So we're going to be borrowing money and also just, getting involved in project development, things that potentially have a lot of liability associated with them. So in addition to quick decision-making, there was also the sense that it's good to create another level of limited liability to protect San Francisco Zen Center. And then I think, sort of a third remote reason for going forward with that was the sense that, if we move forward in developing this Zen-inspired community, we need a vehicle to kind of oversee and ensure the Zen connection to the project. So we set up set up Zen-inspired senior living as a wholly owned subsidiary of San Francisco Zen Center. It was set up with 3 board members or managers. It was Susan, Ed, and Linda Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of became the entity to deal with in sort of further development. I think that's it, huh?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
perfect. So, we found a site. And some of you may remember this because there was a while where that's where we were going to be. And there's a site in Rohnert Park, Sonoma Mountain Village, and we started a process of optioning and entitling, and we hired Mithun to start a design process. I actually have drawings of those buildings and what could fit on that site. There was only about 9 acres. So around this time, Bridge Housing got another one of those phone calls. This is the hardest phone call I've ever had to make. Their board chair came up to Rohnert Park and didn't like the site. And that was enough, even though we'd been working them about a year, I think, and we're really getting along well with the staff, and they were so excited. At the board level, we didn't do a good enough job of managing up, right? We didn't manage the boards as well as we could have. And so they pulled away. So there you go. Second time, the whole project fell apart. And so what do? We issued another request for proposal to find another partner, because even though it kept falling apart, by this time, we'd found a site that we had an option on. We had this tremendous marketing response, plus we had a mailing list of about 4,000 people at that point, because people just kept saying we want to stay, opting in to stay involved. And we had this $3 million that we could spend if needed. So we put it out there, and Kendall came back. Kendall was one of the groups that said we'd be interested. So it was like, wasn't time before, wasn't time for us, wasn't time for them. And there were 3 possible partners, Greenbrier, Kendall, and this other partner, and the other partner that we didn't choose was calling and offering us $6 million. We'll be your partner, here's $6 million. And Kendall was saying, we're not going to give you any money. And so it came down to a phone call, and the man, this is a really wonderful thing that helped us solidify our relationship with Kendall. Their CEO, Sean Kelly, had just been in that job for about, 9 months or something. And his predecessor, John Diffie, who I had met, had managed a strategic plan about no growth. And Sean came in and was supposed to be actualizing that plan. And he heard about this idea, and he said, we're going to grow, and we're going to go to California, which was such a bold move, such a brave move. And it was very clear to him and to me and to all of us, it was the values integration. This is so rare that two organizations who are really, really based on values, not just words, and that we were kind of the perfect partners for Kendall to take a step in a new direction that had that spirituality in it, and also they get to come to California, and for us to have a partner who, I always used to say, it's really nice having a partner you know won't lie to you, and that's not always true. So so we chose, and Greenbrier wanted to do it too, and he thought, we've been working with Greenbrier, we really know them. Kendall hasn't developed for a while. We really like them, and we like the idea of being associated, but let's put them together. So we chose Kendall and Greenbrier. And so at this point now, we have a new partner, two partners really. We have a site, we have this $3 million, we've got a mailing list, and boom. You want to say what happened?
Yes, the third time that things fell apart involved the developer, the owner of Sonoma Mountain Village. When they offered this site, they candidly had not done their full homework about the cost of preparing the site at a developable level, given its circumstances, and a number of other shortcomings. And so we had an option, and by some chance, the option turned. And that was actually a mistake on our part. But they took advantage of that broach or breach in that option to basically rescind. And they came back to us with a price for the land that was double what we were into it for. And we'd done enough analysis on the project, even with the kind of numbers that Mark was speaking about, to know that we really were not going to be able to afford much more than about $10 million for land, and all of a sudden we're facing double that. That was the end of that.
That was one of the moments that Mark talked about where we had a board by then. We had Kendall at Sonoma by then, and I was sure they were going to say the project is over. And they didn't. They said, let's go find another piece of land. So this is the heart of a developer, right? It wasn't over as far as the board. There were 7 people on the board? 7 people on the board. People who kind of were recommended through Kendall, people who were recommended through the Zen Center, wonderful board. So then through a board member, he knew about a real estate guy here, Drew, who's the real estate guy for everybody.
Eric
Drew. And Eric brought us here to this site. Again, Mr. Comstock had just gone into escrow on the whole site. But for various reasons, he needed exactly what we had. He needed a senior living community because of all kinds of reasons about developing housing.
He needed an anchor project.
Yeah. And he let us do an option, and we were then starting down the path with an actual site, a partner, and we knew we could spend the money we had because we had a partner. And this is just something you may not know, but to take a project like this through the stage where you have to do the optioning of the land, buying of the land, marketing it, and designing it is about $25 million. And so we had 3. And Ed and I had cultivated this impact investment company. So it was a family with money who wanted to do good in the world with their money. They had never done anything like that. We cultivated them for about 1.5 years, and brought them into understanding this business. We had the wonderful people at Ziegler doing, educational seminars for them about how the business worked. And they ended up loaning us the $24 million so that we could do the next step of this whole project, which allowed us to do the things like hire the architects, have this financial advisor, and start getting contract numbers so that we knew what it was going to cost, and continuing to find you all to get us to the 70%. So this is the last slide. Okay, this is the last slide. We're going kind of fast now because there's just so much information, but we're going fast because there was a lot of momentum at this point. And the marketing success that you all provided was off the charts. No one had ever seen. So when you may remember, you all wanted to be on a priority list, right? And you sent in $1,000 to be on that list. We collected $1,000 in 3 weeks. Because there was this pent up, all this time, it's coming, and also people's imagination of what this might be. Now, we didn't have any pricing at that time, right? So we did that first step, and then a year later, you all responded to transferring that $1,000 into actually putting 10% down. And again, in the first, let's see, what was it? In the first, like 3 months, we got to 70% pre-sold. And then by the time that spring came around, we were at 95% pre-sold. This was again, these things don't happen, do they, Mark? These things don't happen.
No.
No, they don't happen.
Unprecedented.
Unprecedented. So we were then able, we knew what it was going to cost to construct. It was $280 million, but we had to get $300 million for various reasons. And tell them what happened when we got the money.
Well, first of all, how many people, when we asked for the 10% deposits, how many people in this room actually put their money in?
Right.
So you guys are the
you.
people that made this happen
That's
at
right.
that moment.
Correct.
If you recall, that was in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
You couldn't even come up here and see the preview center. You did it online. We set up an online, and you did it. And when we raised the $300 million, I remember we held meetings with possible mutual funds who were going to put the money in, and they said, it's the 95% that have signed up. That's why we're going to put the money in.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why we're going to put the money in. And I don't know who's going to tell the dramatic story of the morning when we opened up the offerings, how quickly.
I'm going to tell it.
You tell it.
So you've been watching the years go by, right? And just so our bankers gave us access to a website. So you're talking to the bond people, and you've got all this work that Mark did, these giant pieces of offerings, and he said they have an hour to bid on this offering. And so you see this thing online, and it's got these bars. And so there's a bar that high for short-term bonds, and a bar this high for mid-range bonds, and a bond this high for long-range bonds. So the bell goes off, right? And we're watching live the bars fill, right? They're filling. So people are putting bids in for those things. They're filling, and then they're overfilling. And then they're overfilling, and they're going almost all the way to the top of the page. And we ended up raising 7 times the money that we went out to get. It was in the billions of dollars. And, you don't get to keep it all. You got to choose and do a whole thing of letting people, get percentages of what they bid for and all of that. But It was, and no one had ever seen anything like that either. So there's a lot of things that we've done and we continue to do together that no one has ever seen before.
You should mention that in that process, the interest rate on aggregate interest rate
We got a
went
really good interest rate.
unheard of.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Unheard of low.
I had never seen a bond deal sell this quick. These were unrated bonds. Yet they sold at a market that was comparable to, A-rated bonds. And again, it was, multiple times oversubscribed. And it was nothing like I had ever seen before. And I think the bankers were of the, same view. This was unprecedented. And I think a couple of things to note there. I mean, one clearly was the speed at which folks signed up, with their deposits, and that it was at a 95% level. Secondly, this was like a new idea. I mean, sort of the traditional view of senior housing was what I call the country club model, where, it's built around golf or something like that, and there's a clubhouse where people get together and have lunch and drinks and dinner. But to have a spiritual focus here was wholly new, I think. And that's what supported this tremendous, both the deposits that were made in terms of this as a new idea, as well as, something different from the country club model.
Yeah.
So, again, plaudits for the coming up with the concept.
So that's the story. It just gets us to, end of construction, move in. So there's, all kinds of other details in there, but we wanted to bring you on the journey and give you a sense of, why it is the way it is, because it's been infused all along with a kind of Zen spirit, and it had an initial purpose of sharing that spirit. So is anyone that needs to leave, please leave, but shall we go for about 20 minutes like we promised for questions, or 15, 20? Is that okay? All right. So we're going to have somebody move the microphone around. You want to do it, Russell? Okay. So Mary Ann behind you has her hand up.
Yeah, it's on now.
Mary Ann, yeah.
Was there any blowback from the city when you presented this to Healdsburg, to the city of Healdsburg?
Blowback.
Well, criticism?
Walter, why don't
Yeah,
you?
sure. I can take that one. At the time, I was a consultant to the city. I've worked with them on housing issues and a number of other things over a long time. And yes, there was some concern, and it had to do with what Mark said of country club, that word. He had a vision of what this would be as kind of an exclusive, gated, isolated project that wouldn't really contribute to the city. So
Can I?
Yes, please.
Because I'm a resident, longtime resident. That was because of Montage.
Yes.
Montage had waited 8 years to get a permit
Right.
to build their place.
Right.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes. But as one of my assignments, if you want to think of it that way, was knowing as I did council members and the city manager and the planners and all, not in any marketing or hard sell, but I was informing them about this and its merits softly, and of course Susan and others were involved with that as well. So we made an effort to engage, and this is back to the topic of resistance that Fu mentioned, of engaging that resistance and engaging those questions in a positive way, and sooner or later they became supportive, and they were good partners throughout that development process, in my opinion. And we went through a lot of negotiations and difficult topics, which we won't go into in detail, but we met all of their obligations. And the key thing that's important here going forward is this issue of what I refer to as porosity, what this community does for Healdsburg and vice versa. And I hope that it's my vision and thought that this isn't a thing apart, but a part of.
Well,
the community.
I'm on the transportation committee and don't have a car, and so there are a lot of people here who cannot get into town, and we're doing a beautiful job of doing shuttle work now.
Mm-hmm.
But that, and trying to introduce people to the town,
Mm-hmm.
but the connection is not being done in a lot of cases, especially a single person who moves here, doesn't know where to park, doesn't know if there's a bathroom in town, all these things. This is not part of your performance, but it's something we really have to work on because we are out of town.
Well, yes, but that access, to your point, access is the key to
Right.
engagement. So that's a project that you'll continue working on.
I love this presentation, and I recognize that while you guys were excited, we were all chewing at the bit to get in. However, I'm really interested in how you made the decision to let us in before it was finished.
Well, our partners who have the expertise that we don't were recommending that part of it was financial because of needing to start paying off the short-term bonds.
And there was the construction delays related to COVID.
And there were construction, delays because of COVID and just supply chain. So it was kind of crunching in there. And, there were mistakes. Obviously, it should have been done better. It wasn't. And I think the only thing positive I bring out of that is those of us who were here are quite bonded. The down comforters in the lobby that we were given, and then the next day the heaters because the down comforters weren't enough. So I've heard that this is not unusual. It happens. It's not unique, but I don't think we'd do it again the same way. Yeah.
Okay. What, if any, is our relationship to this program, Zen-inspired program, that they're building, I guess, San Fernando Valley or Southern California anyway?
Yeah, Simi Valley.
Simi?
So, we sometimes talk about it as a sister community, but it's its own separate 501c3. So it's more like we're friendly to each other, but it's two separate things. There is a wish to continue to offer this way of living to a wider population. There's a beautiful piece of land down there that we got involved with. So it's not a direct connection, it's more like a friendly connection. Same partners, though. It's still Kendall and Zissel.
Whose monks are going to live there?
Yeah, it's a slightly different model. What we've done is we want to have a variety of contemplative practices represented. So, some Buddhist, we'd like to find a rabbi, a yoga teacher, that kind of thing, so that and they will be paying their own way. So it's not being supported by the Zen Center in that way. We're just trying to give refuge to a few more people who've spent their lives offering contemplative practices in a larger community. There won't be as many. We have 10 spots down there for that. And we've started an application process and have chosen a few.
How many residents?
It's about this, it was a few more. It's about 10 more units than this. It's about maybe 10 more residences than here.
Okay.
About the same size, yeah.
James, as I come over there, when are we going to have memory care?
Well, that's not the topic of
No,
tonight.
I know.
Because that's a very, very specific thing that's being worked on by some very smart people. So,
James Kemp. So I lived in Silicon Valley for 40 years, and I always worked for big tech companies. I never actually worked at a startup. And Susan, your dedication and continual coming back from disappointments, and is something that characterized as startup founders. I wonder if you could say a little bit about what sustained you and convinced you to continue doing this, because I've never had that myself. I've never been able to do that, right?
Thank you, James. The world kept saying yes. Really, just that word, Zen-inspired senior living, no matter who I would say it to, they would always say, that's a good idea. So the concept was strong enough, and I think also the generational timing, us old hippies, and, it was the right thing at the right time. And as a filmmaker, this is, you got to be a little bit ahead of the curve, and you got to be sussing out the zeitgeist of the moment. And this felt like that. Like I dropped into something that the world wanted to happen. So that sustained me a lot. Plus good partners, and and the resistance kept me from being too crazy. I did want to confess, I did lose my credibility along the way with the board, because I was too positive. I got too salesy. The kind of holding it up, buoying it up, with positivity is like, people can smell that as fear, right? And so Ed was it's like, well, let's just trot Ed in, because everyone listens to Ed.
Thank you very much for that. I happened to have been Central Abbot during some of those periods, so that was helpful. I just want to add one point to this. Susan is an inveterate entrepreneur. I was in tech for 20 years. I've seen entrepreneurs. This is one. She could not be stopped on this project. I mean, there were times when it looked dark, and she was the one that said, we will do this. And she gave, yes. We had a lot of support from the wider world and everything, but you cannot underestimate the singular power that Susan had as an entrepreneur in this project.
Jackie Booth is next.
Jackie Booth here. I want to say that your enthusiasm carried over to Sean Kelly. Mm-hmm. I heard about you when I had just moved to another Kendall in Chicago. His enthusiasm, he almost levitated. He was so enthusiastic that he started to give the history of the Quakers at Kendall. Mm-hmm. And then he said, and we are about to join forces with another community in California. We are going to build a place there. And there we are going to be with the San Francisco Zen Center. And he went on and on. He was so excited. I thought, that would be great, but I've just moved here. So I waited 7 years. And then I heard that you were taking people in. Well, I thought, oh, okay, I'll give a call. I talked to Leslie. And she said, well, that would be great. And I said, I'm really interested. I looked over the floor plans, and I'm interested in Cedar. And I said, are there any apartments available? Well, there are 4. One was a Cedar. I said, I'll take it. And where is it? She said, it's on the ground floor. I said, no problem. And so it was your enthusiasm, truly, and excitement, and just the groundwork that you laid, and the enthusiasm carried over to Sean. He was a perfect person.
Thank you, Jackie.
And I am so grateful for how it all turned out. Thank you.
And thank you for being so nice to Bailey.
Richard McCombs. Richard, do you still want to have the microphone?
I can do it without the microphone.
No, for the Zoom people need to hear you.
Sorry.
Richard McCombs here. Thank you very much, everyone. Fu, you haven't said very much. At what point did you go from resistance to excitement?
I think when the movers arrived.
Here. No, you should tell that story. Yeah, it was when the movers arrived, I think. It was not an easy
Yeah, I don't
process.
think really any of us would say we really couldn't wait to get here. You know, we loved where we were. We loved our community. I was there for 50 years. I wanted to be there until I died. I wanted to be there and take care of my friends. And so I think the idea of coming here was it just seemed wrong. You know, why would I leave? But then actually it was important that we leave. You know, I have good friends, Dominican sisters, who are basically dying in sight, and there's no new ones coming, and it's tragic to watch what's happening with them. So we could kind of see the handwriting was there for us too. So anyway, this is sort of like being reincarnated in one of the God realms. Thank you for asking.
Just speak.
Okay. Sorry, I'm Lou Linden, and I have a question about, we live here now for 6 months, and I couldn't be happier. But I have a question about what your vision is for how Enso relates to our neighbors here and also the city of Healdsburg. You know, we're not the only people who occupy this North Village.
Right.
There are 1, 2, 3, 4 three others. And I'd like to understand how that all fits together. Thank you.
I'm sure that this is going to be co-created. So I don't know what they need, right? We have meetings, David has meetings with the hotel people once a month and talking about sharing services. It's evolving. They're crazy trying to get open right now. And my experience of this community going out more, like what you're talking about, Marianne, and what you're talking about, when we first come here, we're in trauma. We've just left a place, whether it's Green Gulch of 50 years, whether it's your home, whether it's your yard, you just left something. And no matter how happy we are, we have to settle before we can go out. And I have confidence. I've started to go to benefit events. You know, I picked a couple that I really like, to nonprofits that I believe in. And I love to go, I haven't done it yet, but Tuesday night in the park, and there are things to do. I'm settled enough to think about it. So I have confidence. I mean, I know someone tried to, I don't know if it was Mary Van Dyke at the very beginning, here's a list of people who wants to go volunteer. And there are like 2 names on it. Because you're not ready yet, So that's what I think, Lou.
Okay, Griffin next.
Griffin, I just want to thank you for reminding us that the seed of Enso comes from what Ed called the heart of compassion, and that in the midst of all the busyness here, we have the privilege, the honor of taking care of the one who is not busy, and that invisible, beneficial force is very powerful and very present.
Thank you, Griffin.
Anybody else, or we're going to wrap this?
One more.
Okay,
One
Solari.
more. Okay.
There's one back there.
In hindsight, do you think it was advantageous that it's in Healdsburg rather than Rohnert Park?
Yes. Next.
So I'm Jeff Perrone, and I'm just wondering, given the success so far and the tremendous oversubscription of the bond offering, have you seen imitators out there? Is this, leading some sort of transformation in society generally?
I'm just going to say, I think the authenticity of the San Francisco Zen Center is something that can't be imitated unless it's another substantive spiritual, backing. There are plenty of Zen spas, right? And people who say they're Zen because they have a massage room. Or, what Peruvian pipe music in the, and so people are trying to kind of pick up on the benefits, but they can't do what we're doing because mostly, I think, most senior communities are about turning away from aging. And we're turning to, like, remember Mary Stairs said when she came back from Oberlin and she told them that we had, 5 groups that talk about death? and they said, we don't talk about death. And so, just there's something that I think is worth repeating, but I don't see it yet. Okay, thank you. Thank you.